Assalamu alaikum. This is Muslim Billionaires, episode 4. And welcome for anybody that's tuning in. This episode is about pressure. Something that I was really thinking about as the day went on today. I was thinking about what pressure actually looks like. Before we get started, obviously you guys know the deal. Subscribe, follow. Anybody that's interested in this podcast, shoot me a DM. We can have more discussions about this. But without further ado, the topic is more about pressure, and pressure from not only external sources, but pressure on yourself. I want to first start with the pressure surrounding yourself, and where does the pressure actually come from? So most pressures come from external forces, right? Expectations from others, expectations from social media, expectations from what you see in people's already established success. Those are essentially pressure on you, thinking that two things are how you respond to that. One, you think when you're on the path of success, you're thinking that you may not make it because you compare yourself to that established successful person, and or you just become somebody that views that person as already successful and finished product that it's mostly unattainable, and which sometimes leads to jealousy, anger, and hate comments. So let's talk about the first part of that. The first part of it is when you see somebody established and has already attained something that you think you're striving for, and it doesn't really bode well for your success because you see a lot more failures than their story. First and foremost, you don't know how they got there. Let's just start with that. You have no idea how they got there. You don't know how much failures they had. You don't know how many times they fell down and they got up. You don't understand their pressures and their expectations of how they got there. They haven't gave up to get to that point. But all we do is see the success. So eternally, that's the pressure on us, because we start taking the expectations of that person's unattainable achievements, right? So when we start delving into that, we start to think, hey, what do we say to ourselves? How do we even respond to it? Well, first and foremost, your path is your path. You shouldn't even, I know there's a cliche saying of comparison is a thief of joy, and it is. Because if you start comparing yourself, what joy do you even understand what the process looks like, right? Previously, we've talked about what your story starts to look like, but the enjoyment that you actually comes from it. This is why, again, people that are prolific at what they do, they sit down in interviews and they're ecstatic at talking about their stories, because they enjoyed every part of it. Why? It was tunnel vision. Nobody around them was taking away anything because of what they were accomplishing, right? Again, it's a you versus you competition. You should not start thinking about what other people are doing, because it's going to steal from what you're trying to achieve. It's going to steal from your enjoyment. It's going to start turning out to being jealousy and hatred because of the person that you've seen. And that's the second part of the pressure that comes with the pressurized part of things, is jealousy. You start to feel jealous. And jealousy doesn't bode well into what you're trying to achieve, because where do you stop? Where do you continue? Right? Where do you start and where do you continue from your jealousy? There is no start or any continuation from that, because it's already done. It's already as soon as you start becoming a jealous person, you start to eventually destroy or be destructive to your path. it automatically takes away from whatever you're trying to get to. Automatically. And that's the unfortunate part, because maybe you were so close to where you were trying to get to, but because eternally you didn't know that part, you didn't know what God had planned for you, that your plan started to turn out to being taking away somebody else's plan. Does that both success for you? Some people it deems to that. Even if you start questioning people for why they do it, I always say one of the worst mistakes to make is when you don't even know you're making the mistake anymore. Furthermore, you're actually starting defending it, right? The more and more you do something, the more you start to figure out, oh, you know what? What I'm doing is actually correct in my eyes, because I'm so used to it. If I take so many years of, let's just say, of being so jealous of something, it gets to the point where I put in time to be jealous. The same way it goes with hate. I put in time to hate on somebody or something that they're doing. So why are you trying to take away something that I put in time? So when you start questioning and start pointing fingers at the person saying, why are you hating so much? Or where does this jealousy come from? Is, first of all, it's been internalized, and sometimes you don't see it, right? But secondly, if people do come out with their jealousy, how are you going to tell me something that I put in years of work in? You know? It's the same thing. Like, we talk about how much we accomplish and how much time invested that we put in and how much work we put in, right? But then when you question what we're doing, especially if it's for a positive, we start to defend ourselves. Why is that version not the same when we're doing something terrible? Why is that version of being jealous or hating on something or somebody and putting in time to invest in that? How are we not being consistent enough to realize that person is going to always defend themselves without realizing it, because they put so much time into it? I put in work of jealousy. I put my hours into it. I put my hours in hating, right? But where does it start from? Going back to what I was initially talking about, it's pressure. It's pressuring yourself and having the expectations, again, from two things, right? Expectations of other people's success, and then that success turns into jealousy because you're not achieving it due to what they've attained. And it becomes terrible for you, right? Because, again, you're not reevaluating yourself. You're putting in time of other people and what they're doing rather than putting time in yourself. You know what tells me how much time somebody has is when they talk about people. That's how I know you have so much time in your hands. When you talk about things that are not contributing to society or your community or anything like that, and the conversation is about other people every single time, whether the people you surround yourself with, you're talking behind their back, or you're talking about other public figures and what they're doing, that tells me a lot about you. And if you're trying to achieve and strive for something, never vary from what you're trying to achieve from the people that don't understand what your vision looks like. How can somebody see your vision when they're not in your mind and they don't see your plan? Never put your expectation of other people, of what you expect from yourself, because that's not fair. It's not fair to do that. You just take what people actually, how they treat you, and what respect they have for themselves. Your job is not to figure your job is not to figure out what they are and what. No, it's just whatever you receive is what you get. And from those expectations, as time goes on, if they're not contributing, then it's not about disconnection, it's about distancing. And you're only going to understand those values once you start building values for yourself. Right? Now that completely takes away the pressure from all those things. Now, let's get into the pressure with yourself. We dabbled into pressure of the external forces through social media and people that establish. Let's talk about the pressure within yourself, right? High expectations could be healthy, but it could also take away your effort. I think there has to be a balance. There has to be a balance of reminding yourself of what God has given you, what God has gifted you, what you've already had, what people would be dying to be in your position, right? Like, for example, you have a few $1,000s in your bank account, right? And those few $1,000s you're trying to invest in, and you're like, oh, I wish I can invest more, and I wish I had more money. Look at these people investing, a lot more money, and they're getting more gains and getting a lot more ROI, a big return of their investment. Okay, cool. How about those that don't have those few thousands of dollars? Imagine what they're striving for. They're wishing to be in your position. Humility. That's what we need to talk about. It's being humble with how you got there, but simultaneously being humble enough that the things that you could control and what God could control. Those are the things that you need to start balancing in a very healthy fashion, in a healthy manner. Because if you don't, and all you do is have high expectations and you're trying to go and go and go and go, there's something called you'll be burnt out. Not to mention now that you have so much pressure on yourself, that the external pressures of everybody deeming you as being a failure, or seeing people that are already success as deeming you as a failure, is going to bring you down. All the way down. So what do? You have a healthy balance. You have a healthy balance of knowing that you have what you've gotten with the effort and what God has gifted you, and being thankful for it, and knowing that there are people that haven't got what you've gotten, right? And simultaneously having a healthy balance of knowing the expectations and breaking down your expectations in a strategic manner. What I mean by strategic, I mean breaking it down on a day-to-day basis. Seeing yourself 10 years from now is amazing. It's a good plan to have, to envision yourself of 10 years. Yes, there is a better version of yourself down the road, absolutely. But to keep being fixated on that 10-year version of yourself can be daunting. Why? Because let's say you haven't got what you got after a week. All you're going to do is imagine the 10-year version of yourself. It's okay to have that in the back of your mind, but in the front of your mind is to not only be happy with the small gains that come with it, because small gains count too, but on a daily basis also reminding yourself of, having this type of success, even if it's the smallest gain of it. If you have a business and you sold to a customer and they bought one product, that one product is more than enough. Imagine the people that don't even have the courage to even launch the business that you have, right? You have a licensed company and you have a product, you have an idea, and you were courageous enough to execute, which we should be celebrated a lot more, especially in our Muslim community, where being financially independent should be a celebration. A lot of us need to have a gathering and celebrate, hey, you launched the first business, and be supportive behind it. But we support way more with people getting into debt, while having a status symbol of having a Benz when they're completely in six-figure and down in the hole. That's the unfortunate part that we live in. Whereas somebody that doesn't have debt, launched a company, and has products and has an idea and executed with courage, is not being celebrated. And actually, in actuality, because not a lot of people are doing it, sometimes it's being deemed as strange or weird, right? So that's the pressure of yourself needs to be balanced properly, right? I know it's a mental game, it's mental gymnastics that you have to fight against, but fighting and continue to fight without giving up, inevitably, with God by your side and God being in the center of everything, you should win. Inshallah. I'm praying for anybody that's fighting, right? You should win. And even if you haven't won in that particular battle, right? Is that deemed as a loss? No, it's not deemed as a loss. It's deemed as a lesson, something that you need to learn about why you lost, right? If you're an athlete, because you lost the game, do you throw away your entire career? No. It's just a battle that's been lost in a war that you're a part of. And that war ends until when? Until when? I know you guys are thinking about it. When does the war end for you guys? For every single one of us, not even guys, every single one of us. When does the war end for us? The war ends when we stop trying. You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. But the pressure comes from the fact that we have these high expectations of ourselves. And because we're taking so much shots in such a short span, that we start to burn out. And then the external forces come around. And then the mental gymnastics start to seep it into your mindset. And it starts to take away your courage. It takes years to become an overnight success. You look at these people, how did they get there? They worked. What do you mean? What else have they got there? They've worked. But don't pressure yourself into thinking that you have to be excellent. And not to mention, don't pressure yourself to think that the person's success is your success. It's not. And yes, you have to pivot sometimes. Sometimes the things that you're doing is not working. I could be on this podcast on episode 4 right now, knowing that it may not work. And I'm okay with that. But one thing I can tell myself is that, hey, I know I'm putting myself out there on a weekly basis, talking to people that need to hear this message, and invoking some encouragement for those that are shying away from what they're really great at. I'm okay with that. But the big part of pressuring yourself in a way is that not only are you taking something away from yourself, you're also taking away talent that can be a source of inspiration for other people, they can actually start taking away from what you're doing. Does money equate to your success? Not really. Are there places that you need to... obviously, you need to have money. Yes, you do. Money is very essential. People that say money is not that important, it is. It's really, really important. But simultaneously, you need to figure out how to balance everything. You need to have a strategic planning. I think in the next episode, we're going to talk about financial planning and things that you can do on when it comes to investments. We'll see, inshallah. But for the most part, I think we shouldn't pressure ourselves, because pressure is just a cousin of giving up, right? They're related to each other. You pressure yourself, you allow the pressure from the outside world to take in what you're doing, then you're going to end up giving up. And then it's going to boat into jealousy and hatred because you couldn't get what you're supposed to get, and you've seen somebody else that didn't give up got the success that you didn't get. It happens all the time. You don't want to be that person. Be humble with your success and be humble with other people's success, right? Even if it doesn't align with your thing, with what you're doing, be humble. Have humility, and do not pressure yourself in thinking, 10-year version, I'm going to be a multimillionaire. What happens if you get 6 figures? What happens if you earn 6 figures a year out of the thing that you actually truly love? Do you still fail? You aim for the moon, but you're landed in the stars, right? But because you didn't land in the moon and you're amongst the stars, does that make you a failure? No, it shouldn't be. You still have the freedom. You still have the passion. Because you're making a little bit less than what you're supposed to be making and the expectations of what you're supposed to have, that doesn't deem as a failure, but some people look at it as a failure. I'm only making $200,000 a year, and I'm having the job of my life. I'm very passionate about is paying me the $200,000. Do you know how amazing that is? Do you know how many people would love to wake up to something they actually love, right? And it doesn't feel like work. But because you're pressuring yourself and thinking, I made far less than what I thought I was going to make at that point, doesn't mean you failed. It means you succeeded more than you thought when you were 5 years prior to where you were today. 5 years prior to where you were today. And that's something that if you really want to compare something, compare yourself from where you were 5 years ago. If you really want to start comparing things, right? 5 years ago, where were you? And 5 years ago, 5 years now, where you are now, how do you compare yourself? Was there progression? Was there not progression? If there was, congratulations. Even if it was small, right? Because you fought. I don't care. I care more of the fight than I care about the battles, how big the battles are. Some people fought big battles and won. Some people fought small battles and won. But both of them, to me, are, to an extent, a success. But if you don't see it that way, then it becomes troubling, right? So don't pressure yourself. Get to a place where you know you're humble and you're thankful for everything God has given you. And remind yourself of where you were before and where you are today. Thank you for listening, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.